L'chaim. Chof Beis Shevat, 35 years ago, it was on a Tuesday night, late Tuesday night. We were sitting. I was sitting in the office of the Hanachas. We were working on the Yechidus that the Rebbe had, the Sikha that the Rebbe said in Yechidus on Chof Aleph, like the night before. And we heard the news, and like everything sort of dropped, obviously. Nobody went to sleep that night. People were very shocked. Personally, I knew that some of the members of my family were there for Yud Shvat and wanted to go visit the Rebbetzin, and they said that she's not feeling well or something. But the Rebbetzin was still coming to the library. Shabbos Yisrei, the Shabbos before, the Rebbetzin was in the library, and the Rebbe went to the library. Al Kaponim, there was a discussion among the Chevra there. Was geht sein? How are things going to continue? As others said, why should anything change? Others said, are you kidding me? The Rebbetzin was like everything. Mepeil, and in Bahisafa to what my friend Rabbi Leibel Korf said before, we all know that there was a Shiva, and on the Shabbos Mishpatim, like this Shabbos Mevorchim, Shabbos Parsha Shkolim, word came out that the Rebbe is coming to 770, and that there will be a Farbrengen. The Rebbe didn't miss a Farbrengen, Shabbos Mevorchim, as we know. So there will be a Farbrengen. And the Rebbe began the Farbrengen in a way that the Rebbe did not begin a Shabbos Farbrengen since Tafshin Mem. The Rebbe began the Farbrengen with a mimer. And the mimer lasted for over an hour. One of the longest mamorim of the Rebbe. The mimer was Zeh Yitnu, Machzis HaShekel. And the Rebbe spoke about the concept and the idea of Machzis. And the Rebbe brought from different drushim. The Rebbe mentioned all the Rabbeim. That Machzis basically means that everyone has to realize that you're only a half. And then the Rebbe brought something from the Mashalim of Reb Meir. The Gemara brings out that Reb Meir was a person who gave a lot of Mashalim to illustrate different things. So one of the Mashalim is, he tells a story, the mashal, of course, of a fox, a shul, that one night it went past a well, and it noticed that there was a reflection of the moon in the well. It looked like cheese. And so it jumped into the bucket, and down it went. And the fox was stuck down there. And then a wolf came by. And the fox says, hey, I got some cheese down here. And the wolf said, how do I get down? He says, you jump into that bucket. So the Zev jumps into the bucket, and the shul goes up, and he runs away. That's one of the Mashalim of Reb Meir. That's one of these stories you might have read in Talks to Tales, or one of these stories. And the Rebbe brought that in the Maimer. And the Rebbe said that sometimes you need to go down. If you're a machzis of something, you need to go down, a yerida. Like the shul is a representative of Kedusha. Ze'ev is klippus. And the shul, because it's a pikeach, that's Kedusha, so the shul has to go down. He goes down in order that the zev should end up going down. Yerida, Tzorech Aliyah, and then he will come up through that. And through this, the Zev itself will also have an Aliyah. It's one of the Nakudas of that Maimah, one of the points of that Maimah. In other words, what the Rebbe was saying was, in this Maimah, again, this Maimah lasted for over an hour, all about the concept of machzitz, of being half, and the obvious understanding of it was that you're talking about the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin here. Two halves. That was the Maimah, that was basically the spine of this Farbrengen. It's also a part of the Mugadik Asicha was taken from the Maimah. And Maisa B'Poel, you see that following Chof Beis Shevat, the fact that there was a machzis that had this histalkus, things changed by the Rebbe completely. Sai the Seder Hayom, the Rebbe came every day for Shachris. And Sai the Seder of no Farbrengens on the weekday. And within the Farbrengens themselves, on Shabbos, eventually the Rebbe phased out Maimorim, Rashi Sichos, Ha'aretz and Zayah, Rambam, Ovis. The whole Seder completely changed. Something that was going on for many years just changed around. The Rebbe said on Chof Gimel Shvat, Tafshin Mem Tes, and a short Sicha, Anaya Tekufa. Alter Rebbe's Niggin, the Rebbe stopped asking to sing. V'chulu, v'chulu. There were so many different shinuyim and obvious shinuyim that were connected to the Rebbe being a Rebbe, like Mamorim, or the Alter Rebbe's Niggin. The Alter Rebbe's Niggin, you should know, that the Rebbe did not ask to sing that Niggin until Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph. Throughout Tafshin Yud, the Rebbe never asked to sing it. And after Chof Beis Shevat, slowly but surely, last time the Rebbe asked to sing that Alter Rebbe's Niggin was Shabbos Shmeis Mem Tes, even before Chof Beis Shevat. Things were slowly changing. You noticed that there was a half that wasn't there, that was missing. And therefore there were changes in the Rebbe's Hanhaga. Ad Kedei Kach, Rebbe Grona told me that in, I think it was either Shvat, the end of Shvat or Oder Tavshin Mem Tes, the Rebbe asked him, I haven't heard of any Chasanim lately. Label said it was 4 or 5 weeks that the Rebbe did not answer any of the Chasanim answers. And the Rebbe, and he said to the Rebbe that we're waiting for the Rebbe to answer. So the Rebbe said, "What the Chob Geret that you talked to, you did the Mevinim, you know." So Label said, this is how he told me the story. He said to the Rebbe that the Chassidim don't want to do that. They want the bracha from the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said, "Ay bazai, bring me the pile." The pile was sitting on the Rebbe's desk. He pointed to the pile, and the Rebbe immediately answered all these answers. These were shinuyim. Some of them, Chassidim was just not makabel, and others happened. L'cha'era, one could l'cha'era say that the fact that the Rebbetzin was so important and so negeya to the Rebbe as like the Rebbe's partner, the Rebbe's connection to the Chassidim was through the Rebbetzin. And I'll share with you a couple of stories b'negeya to that. Things that I believe I've shared these before by this kind of Farbrengen, but a Maisa. Ubehektim. The Rebbe at the Farbrengens, there could be a Hadran, there could be a Rashi, there could be a Sicha about Chinuch, about Israel, all the different Tenuas, and all the different things that were happening. Some of them were like Torah, and some of them were like politics, and some of them were like Chassidus, and all different things. And then there was the Gunim at the Farbrengens. And there were times where you can see on the Rebbe that there was like a great simcha. The Rebbe asking people to say l'chaim. The Rebbe in a scholars this way. And then the Rebbe could have been clapping or could have been encouraging the singing. And then the Rebbe would turn to Rabbi Ohel and just go like this. A little tenua with the head. That would be a simon to start the Maimonigen. And all of a sudden, the Rebbe would change min hakotel hakotel. It was like a different person there. And you can see the Rebbe's shifting. The Rebbe a lot of times went like this with the beard. The Rebbe would straighten out his tie before the Maimah. Sometimes the Rebbe's lips were moving. Sometimes the Rebbe's face turned colors. I'm not talking about the Olam, which eventually would all be standing by the end of the Niggin. And then at some point the Rebbe would find like a place and the Rebbe would softly be shaking up and down, and then like the Rebbe was going to a different world. For 1 minute the Rebbe was in this galus, and the next minute the Rebbe was like a different person. You saw this even more on Simchas Torah. When the Rebbe took the Sefer Torah, it was like a different person. Rebbe's face began to shine and to light up. I've said this many times, and people think I'm crazy, and maybe they're right anyway. But the fact that the Rebbe's face was completely different, mamish different, when the Rebbe took that Sefer Torah and started walking into the Shvil, onto the Ches for Hakofis. So you saw that by the Rebbe. Now, Benegay to the Rebbetzin, I was there one time, I think it was in Lamed Gimel, Shavuos Lamed Gimel, after Shavuos. The Rebbe would come home every day. We all know from Dr. Weiss that the Rebbe would come home every day and he would have tea with the Rebbetzin, and they would sit and they would talk about the obviously the goings on the day of the day. And the Rebbe once told Dr. Weiss that this is as important to him as putting on tefillin every day. But what is not really known that much is the fact that before the Rebbe, there was no time that the Rebbe would come home. There would be some time after Mincha. Mincha would end 3:30, 3:35. The Rebbe would leave anywhere from 4 to 4:20, 4:30. It wasn't the time. But one thing was for sure, that the Rebbe would ask the maskiras to call home every time, a few minutes before the Rebbe was coming home. I think it was 15 minutes before the Rebbe would buzz and say, please call, let it be media that the Rebbe's on his way home. The Rebbetzin would get prepared. She would be prepared for the Rebbe to come home. By the time the Rebbe walked in, the Rebbetzin was wearing whatever it was, izgeputzt. She was sitting at the table, and the tea was on the table. There was no wasting time. As soon as the Rebbe came in, the Rebbe sat down, and the Rebbe were there. When the Rebbe came home, all the guests and visitors and all these people that came to see the Rebbetzin, nobody was there when the Rebbe was there. We all were there during the times, other times, and the Rebbe wasn't there. And Shavuos time, Lamed Gimel, I remember this because it had made such an impression on me. When we visited with the Rebbetzin, it was usually with my grandparents, always with my grandparents. And my grandfather was a loud, jolly kind of fellow, and it was Lebedik around the table. The Rebbetzin would turn to each of the children and ask everyone to say something or to sing something. The Rebbetzin would make sure everybody has something to eat, would give out candies to the kids, cake. There was fruit punch usually on the table, everything like Beis HaMelech. And it was always a decorum. We were always wearing our Shabbos clothing when we went to the Rebbe's house, obviously. You don't stop and walk in there. But still, it was a very friendly type of atmosphere. And the Rebbetzin would be on top of everything. Mamash. She was very short, but the back of the chair sometimes was bigger than her. But she was dominant there. She was like a Malka Mamash. And she would look around and she would smile, she would say words, she would add in things, she would ask questions, she would answer. She was completely on top of it, even with the youngest of the young. And so the Rebbetzin had this big smile on her face. Her eyes were shining. It was lebedik, that kind of thing. Eskalus. And then one of the guys who was working in the Rebbe's house, I don't know who it was, came over to the Rebbetzin. The phone call had come, obviously. That the phone call from 770 came that the Rebbe's going to be home in 15 minutes, whatever it was. So it was probably a little earlier that time than usual and normal. And I remember this guy going over to the Rebbetzin, like behind in her ear and telling her, I didn't hear what he said, but that was obviously what he was saying, because as soon as he said that, in that instant, the Rebbetzins face just completely changed. It was like a different person was sitting there. And within 1 minute, it was so obvious that this meeting is over. She didn't say a word. But just from the tenua on her face, it was easy to see that this was over. And one adult said it, probably my grandfather said, all right, I think it's time for everybody to leave over here. And, and Rebbetzin just smiled and said, thank you for coming. And we were out of there, very quickly. Min akotze el akotze. 1 minute, she was like completely there. The other minute, completely out. That's one thing that I remember. Another thing, my grandparents had the basement in the Itkin's house, which was right under 770, right in the basement. In Tafshin Mem Dalid, Mem Gimel, the Rebbe was at the library during Tishrei. Mem Dalid was a regular thing already. From the summer Mem Dalid, after Pesach Mem Dalid, the library was the place where the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin were every Shabbos. But I think the sukkah in the library might have been built in a different place. And Mem Hey, I wasn't there. I was on Shlichus in Mem Hey in South Africa. And in Mem Vav, I came back. Tishrei Mem Vav, we came back. Tishrei Mem Vav, the sukkah of the Rebbe for sure was on a little porch outside the library between the two houses, like in the back, between the two houses. The library, next door is the Itkin's house, where today is a part of the library as well. And it was the first night of Sukkot. The Rebbe had said a sicha in the shul, and then the Rebbe said another short sicha in the sukkah to the Urchim, and then the Rebbe went straight from the sukkah straight back to the library. And I went to my grandparents were going to have a Suda there soon, and I was standing in the basement. The windows were open. It was a windy, a breezy night. The windows were open. And I was standing near the window. I had no clue that the Rebbe's sukkah was mamish on top of that window. And I hear the Rebbe talking to the Rebbetzin. I only hear one sentence, and I immediately shut that window, and I remained at that window, make sure nobody would open it for at least the next hour or so. And every year, Mem Zayin and Mem Ches, I stood for the first 2 nights of Sukkot, and Mem Ches 3 nights of Sukkot, at that window, to make sure nobody opens it. Because I heard the Rebbe saying to the Rebbetzin, Heint bei Nacht, in the shul given full mit Menschen, like with this excitement. Rebbe was saying that tonight the shul was filled with people. This is a Mem Vov. The first night of Sukkot is Mem Vov. And I was like very startled, taken aback, and shut the window, and that was the end of that, because that's called intrusion, and I didn't feel that would be the right thing to do. I was standing under the sukkah over there to find out what the Rebbe was talking to the Rebbetzin about. But I learned from that the Rebbe said a long sikha in the shul that night. And then the Rebbe said another Sikha. There was Ushpisen, there was all kinds of things. But the Rebbe was talking to the Rebbetzin about, to me it seemed, about the growth, the excitement of what's happening here. That this is a movement that's growing. Full mitmenschen. The Rebbe was sharing with her the machzis, this half, and how important this was to the Rebbe. We see from after Chof Beis Shevat how it happened there. The second nekuda that I wanted to bring up was what happened on the first yahrzeit. The first yahrzeit was Chof Beis Shevat Tavshin Mem Tes. Chof Beis Shevat Tavshin Mem Tes was a Shabbos, and it was a big olam. People came for the first yahrzeit. And then the first sikha was not a maimon. The Rebbe stopped saying maimonim already in the summer of Tismach. The Rebbe said a maimon Rosh Hashanah Memtes, Shabbos Shuvah Memtes, and then Erev Pesach, the maimon Hayadua. But that time, in that Kuf, Chof Beis Shevat, there was no maimonim. The first sikha, the Rebbe started off with the Rambam. And lately, the last few days, people are kochen sich in this. In the Sikha that the Rebbe said on Perik Yud Beis Hilchos Shabbos about Hamavir, that the Meleches Mavir on Shabbos is Kol Shehu, even the smallest amount. Ubilvad sheyehi tzorich le'efer, on the condition that the person is lighting the fire because of the efer. And the Rebbe was using this term v'hachayit in a libay throughout the year. And the Rebbe, every time the Rebbe mentioned the Rambam, the Rebbe always said that hayro v'chayit in libay. And the Rebbe said it was a long sikha, also over an hour the sikha. And the Rebbe said that, and this is a sikha in Chelek Lamed Vav now. The Rebbe said that the reason why the Rambam would start with Hamavir, Kol Shehu, B'vache Yitzarech La'efer, because it's an unusual purpose of lighting a fire. Who lights a fire for the ash? You light a fire to be warm. You light a fire to read something or to see something. You light a fire to wash something. B'vache Yitzarech La'efer is a very unusual need for lighting a fire. Who needs an efer? Who needs the efer? And the Rambam Dafka started with that because of the Avodas Hashem. It's every time there is a malacha, which Mavir is a malacha, there has to be efer, there has to be a to'elis from this. There has to be, you have to make a change in the world. That was, I'm giving you one little nekuda from this. And then the Rebbe said at the end of this sikha, As hat gebrennt a fire und genommen a neshama. Rebbe said these words. A fire came and took the neshama of the nifteres, the Rebbe said. So it cannot be. Everybody was wondering what would be on the yard sign. It cannot be that this is stam and Indian. But there has to be a te'elis and a difference, a shinoi that's made in this world, and akadekach, that's so important that the Rambam begins Hilchos fire dafka with this. And this was the first yahrzeit that basically wrapped up that whole year, Shnas Avelus, that whole year. And then the Rebbe was Magia that Sikha in Yiddish, and recently I saw a copy of it. And the Rebbe was Magia that Sikha with the greste van them, changed around all kinds of different things on page after page after page. Not just stam correcting things, but changing things. Milakotze elakotze. It seemed that the Rebbe had a special koch in that Sikha. 4 years later, Vayakhel Nun Beis, this would turn out to be the last sikha that the Rebbe was Magia in Likutei Sichos until this day. And that is the Sikha. It's that very Sikha that the Rebbe said on the first yard side, that's the last Sikha. For some reason, we make a big deal out of Va'ata Tetzaveh, and as we should, because this is the Maimon that not just the Rebbe was Magia, the last Maimon, but the Rebbe actually gave it out. But this also is unbelievable. It's mamish amazing, because this is the final Sikha that the Rebbe said, that the Rebbe was Magia, I'm sorry, and that this, Ad Hayom Hazeh, and that this Sikha is what the Rebbe said at the end of the year for the yard site, the first yard site of the Rebbe. Not only that, if you look at this Sikha, you can check it out, you can look it up. There are 27 Ha'oros and Mara Mekayim. It's number 27. And 2 days after Vayakal Nun Beis was 27th of Adar, Chof Zayin Adar. And what does it say in the final Ha'orah there? The final Ha'orah, the Rebbe says that there are other methods of also Mavir, not just Efer. But each one of those methods is in order to bring light, and the final words in the small print in the bottom of the Ha'orah, Lahoir es ha'olam, and that is like underlined. Lahoir es ha'olam. The whole purpose of any kind of melacha, halachas kama v'kama, a fire, is lahoir es ha'olam, is to light up the world. How do we light up the world? Let me share with you a story with the Rebbe. A personal story. And again, I did share this story 3 or 4 years ago here. But in case you might have missed a prat, here's the story again. It was before my bar mitzvah in Tavshin Lamed Zayin. My bar mitzvah is in Sivan Lamed Zayin. And we went to the Rebbe's house, as usual, with my grandparents, my parents, some of my siblings. And my grandfather told the Rebbetzin that Yossi's going to have a bar mitzvah. The Rebbetzin turned to me and said, what are you doing for your bar mitzvah? And then the Rebbetzin said, I know the mimer. The mimer, everybody does the mimer. But what are you doing different? So I said, I'm learning also a pilpul. And the Rebbetzin said to me, what's the pilpul about? Now, what was the pilpul about? The pilpul was given to me by one of my teachers, Rabbi Baruch Heiken, Zal sein gesund, and he didn't write this pilpul. This is a pilpul that his teacher gave to him for his bar mitzvah in there, I guess in the Yuds. So it was a very old pilpul. And it was a good old-fashioned pilpul. Gemara in Baba Kama Daf Tzadik Amud Beis. We had it in the Rambam just a couple of weeks ago in Hilchas Niskei Momen. About a Shor HaNiskel, which is in today's Chof Beis Shevat. Shor HaNiskel. It's in today's Chitas. So a Shor HaNiskel is a Shor Muad. Therefore, you have to stone the Shor. Shor HaNiskel is going to get stoned, going to get killed. And then the Shor HaNiskel caused some damage. After it was sentenced to death, the Shor HaNiskel caused damage. Now, generally, we say, "Komnei b'derabah minei." If a human being did that, then you just give the person the bigger punishment. The punishment is misa. The question is, do you say the same thing by a Shor HaNiskel? I'm not going to get into the whole business here. It's a Gemara in Baba Kama. It's a Rambam which we passed a couple of weeks ago. Every time that Rambam comes up, there's a machlekes, a krispedoi, strange names, funny things. And I'm saying to myself, I'm sitting there in front of the Rebbetzin, and what exactly am I telling her? Would she be familiar with Shor HaNiskel and Muad and the Tam and Komle b'derabah minei? I mean, these terms that you learn, when you're in Nigla, over there. So I I began to give a little bit of the scenario, and I said, yeah, don't try. And this girl, she starts asking questions. She knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so there was a back and forth for a few minutes. And then she gave the bracha, very nice, whatever bracha she gave. Now, the next day or the day after that was my bar mitzvah. And I said the mimer. And then I was asked to say the pilpul. I started by saying the Gemara Baba Kama, Daf Tzadik Ameves, and they wouldn't let me. The mimer we don't stop, but the pilpul, they wouldn't let me say one word of it. I never said that pilpul. Nishna dos. No one ever asked me, not my parents, not my teachers, not my friends, not anyone, what is your pilpul about? And it was hard. These were hard words and terms. Obviously I read it like a parrot. I don't know what I was talking about. I knew enough of it just to know. The only person in the world who ever asked me about my pilpul was the Rebbe. And dafka, not the mimer, but dafka the pilpul. And I walked out of there like on a cloud, because I said to myself, the Rebbetzin obviously realized that this is one place where very few people go, but you spend more time. The mimer, half of the mimer when you were 12 already, because you heard it from your other friends and from your brother and from v'chulu v'chulu. The pilpul, nobody knows, and you spend a lot more time on this if you have to say one, and if you have to say Baal Peh, like we used to do at least those days. And so, to me, this was a lahoyres ha'olam moment. It was taking somebody and making them relevant. And these are the two things that I think we can take from Chof Beis Shevat. Number one, the Rebbe said to learn from the Nifteres that we should all be machzah, a machzis of the Rebbe. Machzis of the Rebbe means that we become the feet and the arms of the Rebbe, which the different shlichus and the miftzoim. It means to learn the Rebbe's Torah. Let me ask yourselves, if somebody stopped you in the street right now and asked you for a Dvar Torah on Parshas Mishpatim from the Rebbe, would you have something to say? Or would you say, I didn't go to school today, I didn't get a Parsha sheet? Would you have something to deliver if somebody asked you, quick, I need something on Parshas Mishpatim? Do you have anything from the Rebbe? There are more than 50 sichos and vetelach and inyonim from the Rebbe just on Parshas Mishpatim, and on Truma and Tatzaba and Kisisa v'Yakov B'Kudei. Do you have one or two from every Parsha in the Torah that you can talk to somebody and share with them the Rebbe's Torah? That's machzis. That's how the Rebbe began in the Shiva. That's how the Rebbe began that Farbrengen. Do you go to sleep before finishing 3 prakim of Rambam every day? This is the one thing that you can do that the Rebbe asked you to do every single day. Mitzvah tefillin you can't, and mitzvah avos Yisrael you can only do when you have Yidden around, and v'chulu v'chulu, mitzvah matzah. But Rambam, 3 prakim the Rebbe wants for all Chassidim to learn 3 prakim of Rambam every day. Every day is another 3 prakim of Rambam. Machzis, to learn from the Rebbetzin to be the other half of the Rebbe. And the second thing is lahoyres ha'olam, when you see somebody, the words that we say should reflect how careful we are and sensitive we are to one another. That's everybody who talks about the Rebbetzin will tell you that. Everyone. That she had a knack to zero in on that one thing that made you feel like the top of the world. L'hoyres ha'olam. These are the things we can learn from the Rebbe on Chof Beis Shevat, as the Rebbe said, to learn from the Nifteres and all the things that she did. And the Eibush to help. This is a Rebbetzin that nobody knew. All the other Rebbetzins, all the Chassidim knew and met, and they were very active and involved. And the Rebbetzin chose to be the machzis that was hidden. Only after Chof Beis Shevat did the Rebbe bring out the Rebbetzin. And so we all should be able to connect and to learn and to become what the Rebbetzin was, and to fill that obligation that the Rebbe wants from us, to learn from the Rebbetzin, to be that other half, to light up the world, so that the Rebbetzin should come back together with the Rebbe, B'Rashenu, and it should be Gula Amitis V'Ashlema taken from Yad Mamash. L'chaim.